Let me read to you and show you. First, let me show you the new cover of Vogue magazine, which was released minutes ago. This is our First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden. The caption is, "We will decide our future." Now, here's what I posted on X, Jim, about to discuss the First Lady in the photo with Jim Geraghty. It has been my practice since beginning in radio in 1990 and then television in 1992 not to discuss president's spouses or children unless they are driving news stories of substance. Even then, I'm reluctant. They are not the president. They don't run for anything, and their lives are not even classic, quote, public figures. My con law students learn to distinguish from average citizen. First Lady is clearly a public figure, but generally not one who is making traditional news, and thus they should be beyond the rough and tumble of political commentary. Last paragraph. But if Dr. Biden is not a traditional First Lady because of the infirmity of Joe Biden, if she is in Edith Wilson territory, then we have to discuss her. And since the events of Thursday night suggest she has unfurled her Edith Wilson flag. What do you think, Jim?
Hugh, you did such a good job answering all the questions. You did a great job. Here's a cookie. That appearance after the debate. Well, first of all, it was very bad. Like, their first frightening thing after the debate was that Joe Biden, apparently gingerly helped off that stage by Jill Biden, thought he did a great job. He did not seem to realize that he had turned in, I think, the worst debate performance of anybody in the modern era. Then they go out to the rally, and Jill Biden talks to him like a toddler who went potty. And it was just this ludicrously condescending. You answered every question. No, he did a terrible job. Why are you talking to him like this? And why is he grinning like a kindergartner who just did a good job? Now, Hugh, you and I have been talking about Biden's age, his mental state, his sharpness,
His
his memory
infirmity. That's been my word
for
for
the
2 years.
entirety of his
Infirmity.
presidency. Yeah, since at least Afghanistan, right? He didn't appear for like 3 or 4 days straight during Afghanistan, which is really weird for a president during an ongoing foreign policy crisis to not appear at all. And then when he did, he took short statements, reading off teleprompter, didn't take any questions. The one interview he did with Stephanopoulos was terrible. That was 4 or 5 days ago, man. And from that very much, I've written my one of the things that there's something wrong with the president, and I got a lot of grief for it from the likes of Chris Cillizza, and I'm still PO'd about it because we could see this, and the entire past 3 years has been no, Biden's fine. It is a sign when the president does not appear. It is a sign when the president doesn't do events before 10 a.m. or after 4 p.m. It is a sign when the president doesn't do events on weekends. It is a sign when the president cannot make a public appearance the day after a foreign trip. This has all been out there the whole time. And how is it that you and I saw this for years, and then Thursday night, but around 9:05, the entire liberal intelligentsia, the entire punditry are shocked that this guy. I mean, my assumption is they thought that he's in rough shape, but he can hold it together for a night, and he can't. And don't tell
Jim,
me about
I'm
how
not,
great you look reading off the teleprompter in Raleigh, North Carolina.
I am no longer a litigator or a lawyer. I still teach con law, but there is a term in evidence called the excited exclamation. That is when someone who witnesses an event utters something that has probative value. Maybe not dispositive, but probative value. If you see a car run over a pedestrian and say, "Oh my God, he killed her," that's an excited exclamation that gets into evidence as being more probative than something you think you remember later. The excited exclamation. So the excited exclamation of Blue Bubble Media Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. How would you summarize it?
Someone was observing. Remember when, first of all, the special counsel looks really vindicated right now. But remember the reaction to her. Remember Biden goes out and he shouts and he's so indignant and he's so angry and he says, "How dare her bring up my son's death?" Well, we went back and checked the transcript, and well, actually, no, Joe Biden brought up his son's death. And Joe Biden had trouble remembering what year that was. He had trouble remembering what year he stopped being vice president. He had like all kinds of details. But we've never gotten the audio. They invoked executive privilege to stop the release of the audio because it could be used for deep fakes by AI, Hugh. Thank goodness there's no other audio samples of the president. If they don't release that audio tape, there's no way they could do this. Look, we know from that we all kind of knew. But then what was kind of baffling about it is that Joe Biden went out there and was furious about something that didn't happen. So maybe he's lying, or maybe he just doesn't remember. My favorite example is he says nobody advised him to keep some troops in Afghanistan. And then a little bit later, Milley and other military officials testified under oath to Congress, yes, they did. Now, we're used to Joe Biden lying. We're used to him making up these nonsense BS stories of, I used to be a truck driver, and I was arrested trying to see Nelson Mandela. And we're used to that being the usual nonsense BS tall tale stuff from a ambitious politician. But I think the last couple years it's different. I think he genuinely doesn't remember. I think he remembers what he wants to remember, and that's an extremely dangerous situation for the guy who's commander in chief and whose job is to make good decisions under pressure outside of the hours between war.
Joe is president until he's not, and we are faced with a choice of advocating either that the triumvirs continue their secret rule, and I think the triumvirs are Dr. Biden, Tony Blinken, and Jake Sullivan, and maybe the chief of staff, but I think it's the triumvirs, or Joe resigns and Kamala Harris becomes president. Which is your preference until January, Jim?
Well, okay, the conclusion from Thursday night is not that Kamala Harris should be the Democratic nominee and should take office in January if Democrats win. Kamala Harris should be president right now. We don't really have a president right now. We have a president for 6 hours a day. And I am no fan of Kamala Harris, but you know what? She seems like she could handle a 3 a.m. phone call. She seems like, I wouldn't like her decisions, but at least she'd be awake. At least she'd be remembering things accurately. I have much greater, every morning, both the president and the vice president and other high-level cabinet officials get the presidential daily briefing, the very best assessment from the intelligence community. Here's what happened overnight. Here's our best assessment of what's going on in Putin's head. Here's our best assessment of what's going on with China. Everything in the whole wide world. How much does Joe Biden remember from day to day? I think the answer is quite possibly very little, and that he's making these decisions based in a fog when he's actually making the decisions. And I think, for years now, we used to joke about Prime Minister Ron Klain, right? We used to notice that Biden didn't do a lot of public appearances. Joe Biden didn't do a lot of sit-down interviews. Joe Biden didn't do a lot of formal press conferences. And when he did, he usually had it on a note card. Right? There was some sort of sense. Now, I don't mind saying, I've got a question about the economy. But if if the exact wording of the question has to be provided to the president ahead of time, this is obviously a guy who has to be stage managed, who isn't able to think on his feet. And this is why the whole, don't worry, he was good in Raleigh. Look, anybody can read off a teleprompter. What exposed Biden Thursday night is he had to think on his feet, and he couldn't. And I don't want to discuss where I'm hearing this, but you can see this in other media accounts. Joe Biden, we saw on the debate stage Thursday night, that was not what his team was telling him to do. They felt like they were telling him to talk more about the future, not about the past. He had a whole rehearsed closing statement. He went out there, couldn't remember anything he was told, and just winged it. And we saw the results Thursday night.
Now, quick exit question, Jim. Given where we are, given the uncertainty about whether or not he'll be president another day, much less in January, or if he's the nominee, who ought Donald Trump to select as his running mate if you were to give him advice on who to select to win?
He's got a lot of good options, and I think all of them are more reassuring than the status quo. I think all of them have a really good chance of, really knocking around Kamala Harris in a debate. I think Burgum is high up there as Mr. Reliability, Mr. Even-keeled, reassuring. Rubio, I think, is, prepared for a dangerous world. They got to work out the Florida thing, stuff like that. Tom Cotton in a dangerous world, I think, is a guy who reassures people. Those are the first three to come to mind. But honestly, any normal Republican would kind of be able to say to the country, have you had enough? Are you ready for the scary times to stop? Look, convicted felon Donald Trump is the reassuring choice at this point. Or you could go with the brainwave.
And I think by noon today, he might be unconvicted, because I hope, if nothing else, the Supreme Court decides that state and local prosecutors may not pursue former presidents. It's got to come from the Department of Justice.